My wife got drunk at the New Year party, and before I arrived, decided to put me up for auction. Who wants to spend the night with my ugly old husband and listen to him snore? Starting price $50. But when I walked into the hall, the most interesting part began. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what city you're watching us from. I never thought my life would completely change at a New Year's party. I never imagined that the greatest humiliation I've ever experienced would be the start of my true freedom. But it was. And it all began when I opened the door to the main hall of the company where I'd worked for 15 years and heard my wife Rosalia's voice shouting something that froze my blood. She was drunk, holding the microphone with one hand and a glass of champagne with the other, laughing her head off as she pointed towards the audience. Her voice echoed throughout the place, amplified, impossible to ignore. And what she said was this: "Who wants to spend the night with my ugly old man and listen to him snore? Starting price, $50. Come on, ladies, don't be shy. He's a bargain." Laughter exploded throughout the hall. Executives in expensive suits were doubled over with laughter. Secretaries covered their mouths while their shoulders shook. Some even clapped as if it were the best joke of the year. And I was standing there at the entrance with my wrinkled jacket because I had just changed a flat tire on the road, sweaty, tired, and completely destroyed inside. Rosalia hadn't even seen me come in. She continued with her show, enjoying every second of attention. But what came next, what happened in the following 30 minutes, changed everything, absolutely everything, and not in the way she expected. My name's Sebastian. I'm 51 years old. I'm what people would call an ordinary man. I'm not handsome, I never was. I lost almost all my hair before I was 40. I have a few extra pounds, though not as many as Rosalia always said. I wear glasses to read. My clothes aren't designer. I work at a real estate development company as an administrative manager, a position that sounds more important than it really is. I earn well, I can't complain, but I'm not rich either. I'm invisible to most people, and for 23 years I was invisible even to my own wife. But that night, for the first time in over 2 decades, I became the center of attention. And believe me when I tell you it wasn't how I always dreamed it would be. I arrived late to the party because of the tire. Rosalia had insisted we go in separate cars because she wanted to stay late, and I, in her words, always got tired early like a boring old man. I told her there was no problem. There was never a problem with anything she decided. That's how our marriage had been for years. She decided, I accepted, she talked, I listened, she shined, I disappeared. When I finally arrived at the hotel where the event was held, it was almost 11 at night. The hall was decorated with gold and silver lights, huge balloons hanging from the ceiling, tables full of food and drink, loud music, people laughing. The perfect atmosphere to celebrate the new year, perfect for everyone, except me. I entered through the side door because I didn't want to attract attention. I looked for Rosalia and found her immediately, not by seeing her, but by hearing her. She was on the small stage they had set up for the DJ with the microphone in her hand, talking at the top of her lungs. At first I thought she was giving a funny speech, something typical of her when she drank too much, but then I heard the words and felt my whole body go stiff. Come on, friends, $50 for my husband. I'm giving him away. He's a responsible man, pays the bills on time, doesn't bother much. He does, however, snore like a bear and has no hair. But hey, nobody's perfect. More laughter, more applause. Someone shouted, I offer 25. And everyone burst into laughter again. Rosalia feigned indignation. 25, what an offense. This man is worth at least 30. My stomach twisted. My hands started to tremble. I wanted to run away. I wanted to disappear, but my legs wouldn't respond. I just stood there paralyzed, watching my wife make me the laughingstock of the entire company, of my colleagues, of my boss, of people I'd have to see every day after that night. And then something strange happened, something I didn't expect. In the midst of all that humiliation, in the midst of the laughter and cruel comments, I felt something different. It wasn't rage, it wasn't sadness, it was clarity, a cold and absolute clarity that pierced me like a lightning bolt. I saw everything with a sharpness I had never experienced before. I saw Rosalia on that stage, drunk and cruel, enjoying my pain. I saw all those people laughing at me as if I were less than nothing. And for the first time in 23 years, I asked myself how I got here, how I allowed this to be my life, when I stopped mattering, but more importantly, Why was I still there? Rosalia finally saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a second, just a second, I saw something like shame cross her face, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. She smiled. That smile I knew so well. That smile that said it's just a joke, don't be dramatic. And then she said into the microphone, there's the man of the hour. Sebastian, love, come up to the stage. We're going to close this auction. The entire hall turned to look at me. Dozens of pairs of eyes fixed on me, waiting. Some with curiosity, others with pity, some still laughing. And I still couldn't move, but something inside me had already changed. Something had broken, or maybe something had finally awakened. To understand how I got to that moment, standing at the entrance of a hall while my wife auctioned me off as if I were a used object, I have to go back in time. I have to tell you who I was before I became the invisible man everyone saw that night. Because I wasn't always like that. There was a time when I had dreams, when I had plans, when I thought my life was going to be different. I met Rosalia when I was 28. I worked as a junior architect in a small but promising firm. I didn't earn much, but I loved what I did. I'd spend entire nights drawing blueprints, designing buildings that existed only in my imagination, but that one day, I thought, would become reality. I had a notebook full of ideas for my own architecture firm. I wanted to specialize in sustainable housing, in projects that combined functionality with beauty. It sounds naive now, I know, but back then I thought it was possible. Rosalia appeared in my life like a summer storm, sudden, intense, impossible to ignore. I met her at a mutual friend's wedding. She was wearing an emerald green dress that fit her perfectly. She had long, dark hair, a smile that lit up any room, and a way of talking that made you feel like you were the most interesting person in the world. She approached me. I was sitting at a table in the back, uncomfortable in my borrowed suit, when she came over and said, "Do you always hide at parties, or only when there are pretty people?" I laughed. I blushed and I fell completely for her. The first few months were magical. Rosalia made me feel special. She'd tell me I was different from the other men she'd known, that I was smart, talented, with a bright future. She'd introduce me to her friends as my architect. She'd come to my small apartment and look at my drawings for hours, telling me that one day I'd be famous. I believed her. I wanted to believe her because when I was with her, I felt capable of anything. We got married a year later. It was a simple wedding. We didn't have much money, but we were happy, or at least I was. Rosalia talked about having children, about building a family, about buying a big house where I could have my own studio. I worked more hours, took extra projects, saved every penny I could. I wanted to give her everything she asked for. I wanted to be the man she deserved. But then something started to change. Small things at first, so small I almost didn't notice them. Rosalia started making comments about my clothes. "You're going out in that shirt. You look like an insurance salesman." About my job. "Are you still at that little firm? I thought you'd have moved up by now." About my friends. "Tomas is fun, but he has no ambition, right? I don't want you to settle like him." I changed my shirt. I worked harder. I saw Tomas less because I thought that's what good husbands did: adapt, improve, make their partner happy. When Rosalia got pregnant, I felt everything made sense. We were going to be parents. We were going to have that family we had dreamed of. I left the architecture firm and took a position as an administrative manager at a real estate development company. It paid triple. It wasn't what I loved, but it was the responsible thing, the mature thing, what a family man should do. Rosalia was happy. She hugged me and said, "This is temporary love. When the baby is born and we're stable, you'll go back to architecture." I believed her, but the baby was never born. Rosalia lost the pregnancy at 4 months. It was devastating for both of us. We cried together. We promised we'd try again, but months passed, and she never wanted to talk about it. Every time I mentioned the possibility of having children, she'd change the subject or get upset. "I'm not ready," she'd say. "We're still young. There's time." And I waited, because that's what I did. I waited. The years passed in a strange way. I didn't feel them go by. One day I was 30 years old, full of plans and hopes, and suddenly I was 40, and then 45, and I no longer remembered what those plans were. My job became routine. I reviewed budgets, coordinated teams, attended endless meetings about projects that others designed. Sometimes I'd look at the blueprints and feel a pain in my chest, a reminder of what I could have been, but I ignored it because I had responsibilities, because Rosalia needed me to be stable, because that's what a good man did. And Rosalia kept changing. The comments became more frequent, sharper. She no longer just criticized my clothes or my job. Now it was my body. You're getting fat, Sebastian. You should take care of yourself. My hair. You have less hair every day. You look older than you are. My way of speaking. Why do you always tell such boring stories? At first I tried to defend myself. Then I tried to change, and finally I stopped trying anything. I became silent, invisible, exactly what she seemed to want. Our conversations were reduced to the minimum. Did you pay the electricity bill? What time are you getting home? Don't forget to pick up my clothes from the dry cleaner. She never asked me how I felt. She never asked me if I was happy. She never asked me anything that didn't have to do with chores or money, and I didn't ask either, because at some point we stopped being a couple and became two strangers who shared a house, a bank account, and a last name. Nothing more. My friends noticed before I did. Tomas, my best friend from college, told me directly one day while we were having coffee, "Brother, this isn't right. The way Rosalia talks to you, the way she treats you, it's not normal." I laughed. I told him he was exaggerating, that all marriages go through rough patches, that Rosalia was just stressed from her job, that things would get better. Tomas looked at me with sadness and said nothing more, but I saw in his eyes what he was thinking, that I was lying. He was right. 3 weeks before the New Year's party, something happened that should have woken me up. It was my 51st birthday, a normal day, unimportant to most people, but I had always made a big deal out of birthdays. Rosalia knew that. For years I had organized parties for her, bought her gifts, prepared her favorite breakfast. That day I waited. I waited for her to say happy birthday. I waited for a message, a call, something. Nothing. She came home at 9 at night after going out with her friends. She didn't mention my birthday, not even once, and I said nothing. But that night, lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a deep silence. And for the first time in over 20 years I thought, this has to end. After that night, after Rosalia forgot my birthday as if it were just any other day, something changed in me. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a moment of dramatic revelation. It was more like slowly waking up from a long, confusing dream. I started to observe, to pay attention to things I used to let slide, and what I saw destroyed me in a silent and profound way. I began to notice how Rosalia talked about me when she thought I wasn't listening. One afternoon, I came home early and found her talking on the phone with her sister. She was in the living room laughing, and I stayed in the hallway without making a sound. "No, seriously, sometimes I wonder why I'm still with him," she was saying. "He's so predictable, so boring. He has no ambition, no spark. He comes home, sits on the couch, watches TV, and falls asleep, like that every day. My cousin asked me the other day how I put up with him. She laughed. That laugh I knew so well. And she continued. I told her at least he's responsible with money and doesn't bother me, you know? It's like having a roommate who pays for half of everything." I stood there paralyzed, listening to my wife reduce me to a useful roommate. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't go into the living room. I turned around, left the house, and walked for 2 hours around the neighborhood aimlessly. When I came back, she acted as if nothing had happened. "Where were you?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Walking," I replied. "Ah," she said, and that was all. I started to remember other occasions, other words, other moments I had ignored because it was easier not to see them, like that dinner with her friends 2 years ago. We were at an elegant restaurant, one of those places Rosalia insisted on going to even though I felt out of place in my simple clothes. Her friends were talking about their husbands. Carolina was bragging that hers had just gotten a major promotion. Brenda was telling how hers had given her a trip to Europe. And then Graciela, with that fake smile she always wore, looked at me and said, "And you, Sebastian, what surprises do you have in store for Rosalia?" Before I could answer, Rosalia let out a dry laugh. "Sebastian isn't one for surprises. He's more of a routine guy. Right, love?" They all laughed. I smiled uncomfortably and focused on my plate. Later, in the car, I told her that comment had hurt me. She rolled her eyes. "It was a joke, Sebastian. Now I can't even make jokes." And I stayed quiet, as always. Or like that time her mother came to visit us. I had always tried to get along with my mother-in-law, even though she never treated me with much affection. That day I prepared a special meal, cleaned the whole house, made sure everything was perfect. During lunch, my mother-in-law commented on how nice the house looked. I smiled, hoping Rosalia would mention the effort I had made, but instead she said, "Yes, Mom, I make sure everything is okay. You know how men are. If you leave them alone, everything is a disaster." My mother-in-law nodded. "You're right, dear. Your father was the same. Good thing you inherited my sense of order." I was sitting there at the same table, and they were talking about me as if I were invisible, as if I didn't exist. The comments about my appearance became constant. "Sebastian, that shirt looks horrible on you. You look like an office worker from the 90s. Why don't you exercise? Look at that belly. It gets bigger every day. You should wear hats, so people don't notice you're going bald so much." At first I tried to change. I bought new clothes, tried to go to the gym, but nothing was ever enough. There was always something else to criticize. The way I walked, the way I laughed, my taste in music or movies. Everything about me seemed to annoy her. And little by little I stopped trying. I put on whatever clothes. I stopped looking in the mirror. I stopped caring about myself because clearly no one else did. At family or social gatherings, Rosalia had a special way of making me feel small. There was always a comparison. There was always someone better. "Vanessa's husband just bought a house on the beach. When will we be able to?" "Yvonne was promoted to director. He's been at his company for the same number of years as you, right? How curious." "Alonso always takes his wife to new restaurants. We always go to the same boring places." Each comment was a small needle, but when there are thousands of needles over the years, they end up piercing you completely. My colleagues at work also noticed. They didn't say it directly, but I saw their looks of pity when Rosalia called the office. She never asked how I was. It was never to say something kind. It was always to ask me for something or to complain about something. "You forgot to pay the credit card. I need you to stop by the supermarket. Why don't you answer your messages?" Once my cubicle mate, an older woman named Brenda, told me gently, "Sebastian, not to pry, but are you okay? Your wife seems very demanding." I told her everything was fine. That's just how our marriage was. But Brenda looked at me with those eyes that said, "You don't have to lie to me." And I quickly changed the subject because I didn't want anyone else to see how pathetic my life was. Tomas was the only one who truly confronted me. One night after a few beers, he told me bluntly, "Brother, this isn't a marriage, this is abuse. Rosalia constantly humiliates you, controls you, makes you feel less, and you allow it. Why? Why are you still there?" I got upset. I told him he didn't understand, that marriage was a commitment, that not everything was perfect, but that it was normal. Tomas shook his head. "No, Sebastian, it's not normal. My wife and I have problems. Yes, but she would never, ever make me feel the way Rosalia makes you feel. That's not love. It's not even respect." I left angry. I didn't speak to him for weeks because what Tomas had said was true and I wasn't ready to face it. But after my forgotten birthday, after hearing that phone conversation, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started doing mental calculations, wondering when was the last time Rosalia asked me how my day was. I couldn't remember. When was the last time she hugged me without me initiating it? I couldn't remember that either. When was the last time she told me she loved me, that she was proud of me, that she appreciated something I had done? Silence. Only silence in my memory. I realized something terrible. I had been living for years with a woman who didn't love me, who maybe had never really loved me. And worst of all, I had become someone so small, so invisible, so insignificant, that even I had stopped loving myself. I had transformed into the man she saw, the boring man, the worthless man, the man who didn't even deserve a happy birthday. 3 weeks later, the invitation to the company's New Year's party arrived. Rosalia was excited. "Finally, something interesting," she said. "These events are always better than staying at home watching TV." I just nodded, but inside something had changed. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't have a plan, but I knew with a certainty that scared me and liberated me at the same time, that something had to change, that I had to change. Even if I didn't know how, even if I didn't know when, I just knew I couldn't keep being that invisible man, that man who was worth less than nothing to the person who supposedly loved him. The days leading up to the New Year's party were strange. I kept doing everything as usual. I'd get up, go to work, come home, have dinner in silence while Rosalia watched her TV shows, and I'd go to sleep. But inside something had fundamentally changed. It was as if I had emotionally disconnected, as if I were watching my life from the outside, observing a stranger who looked like me, but was no longer me. Rosalia didn't notice anything, or maybe she did and didn't care. She continued with her routines, her complaints, her hurtful comments disguised as jokes, but they no longer affected me in the same way, not because I had become stronger, but because something inside me had shut down or maybe had turned on. I'm not sure. I just know that for the first time in decades I stopped trying to earn her approval. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped disappearing. One night, for days before the party, Rosalia was getting ready to go out with her friends. I was in the living room reading the newspaper. She came out of the room in a wine-colored dress I hadn't seen before. She stood in front of me, clearly expecting a compliment. Before I would have said something nice, I would have made the effort, but that night I just looked up, glanced at her for a second, and went back to the newspaper. "Well," she said with her hands on her hips. "Well, what?" I replied without looking up. "My new dress. Aren't you going to say anything?" I put down the newspaper, looked at her directly. "You look nice," I said in a neutral tone, completely void of emotion. And I went back to reading. I saw her expression change. Confusion first, then annoyance. "How romantic," she said sarcastically. "I don't know what you were expecting." And she left, slamming the door. Before I would have run after her to apologize. That night, I stayed seated, finished reading the newspaper, and went asleep peacefully. I started doing small things I had never allowed myself to do. One day I came home late from work without notice. Rosalia called me 3 times. I didn't answer until I was ready. When I finally answered, she was furious. "Where were you? Why weren't you answering?" "I was walking." I said, simply walking, "and you couldn't answer the phone." "I didn't feel like it," I replied. There was a silence on the other end. Rosalia didn't know what to say. I didn't know where that calm, that indifference was coming from either, but it felt good. It felt like waking up after years of being asleep. Another night she made dinner, and it was something I didn't want to eat. Normally I would have eaten it without complaining, but that time I said, "I'm not hungry for that. I'm going to order something for myself." Rosalia looked at me as if I had said something offensive. "Since when are you so special?" "I'm not special," I said. "I just know what I want to eat." I ordered Chinese food. I ate it alone in the kitchen while she had dinner in the living room, and I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Tomas noticed immediately. We had lunch together 2 days before the party, and he watched me throughout the meal with a curious expression. "You're different," he finally said. "Different how? I don't know." "More present, as if you've come back from somewhere far away." I shrugged. "Maybe I have come back." Tomas smiled. "Did something happen with Rosalia?" "Nothing happened. That's the problem. Nothing ever happens. And I'm tired of waiting for something to happen." My friend nodded slowly. "Are you going to leave her?" The question surprised me. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because it was the first time someone had said it out loud. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I can't keep being the man I was. That man died, or should have died years ago." Tomas put his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, brother, I support you. But whatever it is, do it. Don't stay in limbo. That's worse than anything." He was right, and I knew it. The morning of the New Year's party. Rosalia was particularly excited. She had bought a new gold-colored dress that she claimed had cost a fortune. She spent hours doing her hair and makeup. When she finally came out of the room, she spun around in front of me, waiting for my reaction. "How do I look?" she asked in that voice she used when she wanted attention. I looked at her. Objectively, she looked good. She had always been an attractive woman, but when I looked at her, I no longer felt anything. Not love, not resentment, not even indifference. Just emptiness. "Nice," I said. "Just that. Nice. That's it. What else do you want me to say?" Rosalia frowned. "You could make an effort, Sebastian. You could act like you care." "I could," I said, and left the sentence hanging in the air. Her expression hardened. "Sometimes you're unbearable. I don't know what's wrong with you lately." "Nothing's wrong with me," I replied calmly. "Everything is perfectly clear. For the first time in years." She looked at me with frustration, waiting for me to say something more, to start a fight, to apologize, but I just put on my jacket and checked my car keys. "I'll see you there," she finally said, annoyed. "I'm leaving now. I don't want to be late." "Okay," I replied. "Drive carefully." She left without saying goodbye, and I was left alone in the house, looking out the window as her car disappeared down the street. I sat on the couch for a long while. I thought about all the times I had given in, that I had disappeared, that I had let Rosalia treat me as if I didn't matter. I thought about the 23 years we had been together, about everything I had sacrificed, about everything I had lost. And I wondered what I had left, who I was without that marriage, without that woman who had defined me for so long. Even if it was to make me feel small, I had no answers, but for the first time in decades I wasn't afraid of not having them. I felt strangely at peace, as if I had made a decision without knowing exactly what that decision was. As if my body and mind had reached a silent agreement. This can't continue. Not this way, not anymore. I left the house an hour after Rosalia. I drove calmly, without rushing. I put on music I liked, something she always criticized, saying it was old people's music. I sang quietly, and I felt good. Really good. That's when I got a flat tire. I was halfway to the hotel when I heard the unmistakable noise. I pulled over to the shoulder of the road. I got out, looked at the flat tire, and instead of getting upset, I laughed. I laughed because it was typical. Because of course something like this would happen, because my life had been an endless series of small humiliations and obstacles. I changed the tire. By myself, I got my hands dirty, my shirt got sweaty. It took me almost 40 minutes. When I was done, I looked at my reflection in the car window. My hair was messy, my shirt was wrinkled, my hands were dirty with grease. And I thought, this is how I feel inside. Disheveled, dirty, tired, but still here, still functioning. Still able to fix what's broken. I arrived at the hotel almost at 11 at night. The parking lot was full. The music could be heard from outside. I walked towards the entrance slowly. Part of me didn't want to go in. Part of me wanted to turn around, get in the car, and drive anywhere else, start over. Disappear for real this time. But I didn't because I had to see. I had to know. I had to close that chapter of my life somehow. I opened the door to the hall, and the first thing I heard was Rosalia's voice, amplified, drunk, cruel. Saying those words I'll never forget. Who wants to spend the night with my ugly old man and listen to him snore? Starting price, $50. And at that moment, standing at the entrance with my dirty clothes and my heart finally awake, I knew my life was about to change forever. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but I knew it. I felt it. And for the first time in 23 years, I wasn't afraid. The hall was decorated as if it were the most important celebration of the year. Gold lights hung from the ceiling, forming cascades of glitter. Silver and white balloons floated in the corners. The tables were covered with cream-colored tablecloths and elegant centerpieces. There was a full bar at the back. A buffet area with food that looked expensive and a small stage where a band would normally play or where the DJ would play music. That night the stage was occupied by my wife, and she was putting on the show of her life. Rosalia held the microphone with one hand, while with the other, she gestured exaggeratedly. Her golden dress shone under the lights. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup flawless. She looked beautiful and completely drunk. Her voice echoed throughout the hall, a little distorted by the sound system, but clear enough for every word to pierce me like a knife. Come on, ladies, don't be shy. It's a unique offer, an almost new husband, little use. Good maintenance. Laughter erupted everywhere. I saw executives I'd known for years double over with laughter. I saw young secretaries cover their mouths while their shoulders shook. I saw my boss, Alonso, a serious 60-year-old man, watching the scene with an uncomfortable expression, as if he didn't know whether to laugh or intervene. Rosalia continued, "Look, I'll be honest with you. He's not the most exciting man in the world. He's not going to recite poetry to you. He's not going to take you dancing under the moon, but he does pay the bills on time. Doesn't complain much. And if you close your eyes while he's snoring, you'll barely notice he's there." More laughter, more applause. Someone shouted from a table in the back, "I offer $30. And the place erupted in laughter again. Rosalia feigned indignation. 30? What an insult. This man is worth at least 40. She laughed at her own joke, and everyone laughed with her. I was still at the entrance. Paralyzed. I could feel my heart beating in my ears. My hands were trembling slightly. Part of me wanted to run away. Another part wanted to go up on stage and snatch the microphone from her. But another part, the part that had woken up in the last few weeks, the part that was no longer afraid, told me, "Stay. Look, this is what it has always been, only now it's public. Now everyone can see what you've lived in private for years." Then, Rosalia did something worse, much worse. She put her hand to her forehead dramatically and said, "Oh, But let me tell you the best part. My dear husband is not only ugly and boring, he's also balding. Yes, ladies, he comes with built-in aerodynamics, and he has a little belly that grows a little more every year. It's like a long-term project, you know? You never know how much more it's going to grow, but it's always a surprise. The people laughed even harder, some even clapped. I saw Carolina, one of Rosalia's friends, laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. I saw Yvonne, a colleague from the finance department, shaking his head, but smiling. I saw Graciela, another friend of my wife's, recording everything with her cell phone. And then Rosalia saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a second, just a second, I saw something cross her face. I don't know if it was shame, surprise, or fear, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. And in its place appeared that smile. That smile I knew so well. The smile that said it's just a joke. Relax, don't be so sensitive. The smile she had used for years to justify every cruel comment, every humiliation disguised as humor. She laughed into the microphone, speaking of the devil. There's the man of the hour. Sebastian, love. Don't just stand there like a statue. Come, get on stage. People need to see you up close to know if the investment is worth it. The entire hall turned to look at me. More than 100 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Some curious, some amused, some clearly uncomfortable. I saw my assistant Brenda looking at me with what seemed like deep pity. I saw Tomas, my best friend, who had arrived with his wife, standing near the bar with an expression of contained fury. Rosalia kept talking. She couldn't stop or didn't want to. Look at that face. That's the face I see every day at breakfast. Isn't it exciting? And that wrinkled shirt. Oh my God, that's classic Sebastian. Always so elegant. So concerned about his image. She took a dramatic pause. Someone offer something, please. Even if it's $1. I need him out of my house. Even if it's just for one night. The laughter now had a different tone. Some were still laughing out loud. But others were starting to look away. Some were murmuring among themselves. I saw Alonso say something to his wife, both with serious expressions. And then a male voice shouted from somewhere in the hall. I offer $10. But only if it comes with a money-back guarantee. The place erupted again. Rosalia clapped. Oh, I'm sorry, no refunds. All sales are final. And she kept laughing. She kept enjoying her moment, completely oblivious to the fact that every word that came out of her mouth was destroying anything that was left between us. I walked slowly forward, not towards the stage, but to an empty table near the front. I sat down, crossed my hands on the table, and looked at her. I just looked at her. My expression must have been different from anything she had ever seen before, because her smile faltered for a moment, but she continued. Sebastian, don't sit down. Come here. Don't be shy. I didn't move. I just kept looking at her calmly, peacefully, as if I were watching a stranger do something embarrassing. Tomas came to my table, sat down next to me. Brother, he said in a low voice. Let's go. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to put up with this. But I shook my head. No, I said softly. I need to see how far she'll go. Tomas looked at me with concern, but didn't insist. He stayed sitting next to me in silence. Rosalia, seeing that I wasn't responding to her provocations, changed tactics. All right. If nobody wants to buy my husband, I'll give him away for free. Whoever wants him can take him at no cost. In fact, I'll pay for someone to take him. She raised her glass of champagne. 50 to whoever takes him. That's a reverse auction. I pay to get rid of him. Some people were still laughing, but many weren't anymore. I saw faces of discomfort, of secondhand embarrassment, of this has gone too far. It was then that something extraordinary happened, something I would never, in a million years, have imagined. A woman stood up from a table near the back of the hall. It was Vanessa, the company's new project director. She was 45 years old, elegant, serious, with a reputation for being brilliant and professional. She had always been kind to me in the few interactions we had had, but we had never had a real conversation. She walked towards the stage with firm, confident steps. Her dress was silver gray, simple and elegant. Her expression was completely calm. The hall fell silent as they watched her walk. Rosalia also fell silent, confused, watching this woman approach. Vanessa climbed the 3 steps of the stage with grace. She held out her hand to Rosalia. The microphone, please, she said in a firm but polite voice. Rosalia, still drunk and confused, gave it to her without thinking. Vanessa took the microphone, waited for the silence to be absolute, and then she spoke. Her voice was clear, powerful, filled with a quiet authority that made every person in that hall pay full attention. Good evening, everyone. She began. My name is Vanessa Herrera. I've been the project director of this company for 6 months, and I want to make an offer for Sebastian. A pause. The hall was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Rosalia looked at her with a triumphant expression, clearly thinking that Vanessa was going to continue with the joke. But then Vanessa said something that changed everything. I offer. The silence grew deeper, heavier. No one moved, no one breathed. Rosalia blinked. Confused. What? Vanessa looked at her directly. Not for the man you're all seeing as an object of ridicule tonight, but for the architect you never knew. For the professional this company has been exploiting for years without giving him the credit he deserves. Vanessa moved across the stage with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the frantic performance Rosalia had given minutes earlier. She held the microphone as if she were born to speak in public, with that confidence that only people who know exactly what they're going to say and why they're going to say it have. The silence in the hall was so absolute that I could hear the hum of the sound system, the distant clinking of glasses, the collective breath of over 100 people waiting for her next words. I came to this company 6 months ago, Vanessa continued. One of my first tasks was to review all the important projects of the last 10 years, to learn the history, to understand how we got to where we are, and I found something very interesting. She paused. She looked directly at Alonso, our CEO, who was sitting at a central table with a tense expression. Specifically, I came across the Pacific Towers project, that development that saved this company from bankruptcy 6 years ago, that project that gave us prestige, that opened doors with international investors, that basically made us what we are today. I saw several executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. I saw Alonso exchange glances with other directors. Rosalia was still on stage, completely lost, not understanding what was happening. Vanessa continued. The official project is signed by the chief architect at the time, a man named Ricardo Fuentes. You know him. He was promoted to partner after that success. He's retired now, living comfortably on the profits of his brilliant career. Her voice had an edge to it now, but there's a small problem. Ricardo Fuentes didn't design that project. A murmur rippled through the hall like a wave. Vanessa took out her cell phone from the small bag she was carrying. I have the original files here. I found them by accident on an old server that no one had checked in years. Drafts, emails, documents with intact metadata, and all of them, absolutely all of them, have the name of the person who really designed Pacific Towers. She looked up from her phone and looked directly at me. Sebastian Mendez, the man his wife just tried to auction off for $50. I felt as if someone had punched me in the chest. I couldn't breathe. Tomas, sitting next to me, grabbed my arm. It's true, he whispered. I couldn't speak. I just nodded slightly. Vanessa kept talking. Sebastian was working as a junior architect back then. He was 29 years old. He presented the complete design to Ricardo Fuentes, trusting that his boss would give him credit. But Fuentes did what many powerful men do. He took credit for the work of someone younger, more vulnerable, someone who didn't have the resources to fight back. The words were coming out of her mouth, but I was barely processing them. It was like seeing my life being exposed in front of everyone. That project had been my baby. I had worked entire nights on it. I had put every ounce of creativity I had into it. And when Fuentes presented it as his own, when the company celebrated him as a genius, I said nothing. I said nothing because I was afraid, because I needed the job, because Rosalia was pregnant at the time and I couldn't risk my job. And later, when she lost the baby, it was already too late. The project had already been credited. The awards had already been given. It was already history. Vanessa projected something on the big screen behind the stage. Images of architectural plans, documents, emails with clearly visible dates. Here you can see the original drafts, the creation dates of the files, the emails where Sebastian sends his designs to Fuentes, and here she pointed to another image. You can see the email where Fuentes tells Sebastian that he needs to make some adjustments, but that his contribution will be recognized. That never happened. I looked at Alonso. His face was red, not with shame, but with contained rage, because this made him an accomplice. He had been there. He had signed Fuentes' promotion. He had celebrated that project without questioning anything. And now, 6 years later, he was being publicly exposed. Vanessa wasn't finished. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? That Sebastian never complained, never sued, never made a fuss. He simply accepted a transfer to an administrative position where his talents were completely wasted. And for 6 years, he's been managing budgets and coordinating meetings while the man who stole his work enjoyed fame and fortune. Rosalia finally reacted. She approached Vanessa, stumbling slightly. Wait, this is ridiculous. Sebastian never mentioned any of this. If it were true, he would have told me. Vanessa looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Really? He would have told the woman who just publicly humiliated him, who constantly calls him ugly and boring, who just tried to auction him off as if he were trash. He would have entrusted his deepest pain to that woman. Rosalia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Vanessa addressed the hall again. That's why I offer, not as a joke, not as part of this grotesque humiliation, but as a symbolic gesture of Sebastian's real value. A value that this company ignored, that his wife ignored, that all of you ignored while you were laughing a few minutes ago. The silence was now uncomfortable, heavy, filled with collective guilt. And just to be clear, she added, I've sent all this information to the board of directors this afternoon, also to some media specialized in architecture, not to destroy the company, but to make sure the truth finally comes to light, and that Sebastian receives the recognition he always deserved. Then she got off the stage and walked directly to my table. She offered me her hand. I took it, still stunned. I'm sorry, she said softly. Just for me. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but when I saw what your wife was doing, I knew it was now or never. I nodded, still unable to form words. She squeezed my hand. You have a lot of talent, Sebastian. You should never have been sitting in an office doing administrative work. And if you'll let me, I'd like to talk to you next week about some opportunities. Rosalia came down from the stage, tripping. She approached us with her golden dress now seeming too bright, too flashy. Her perfect makeup now looked smudged by the tears that were beginning to form. Sebastian, she said with a trembling voice, I didn't know. You never told me about that project. Why did you never tell me? I looked at her. I really looked at her, and for the first time in 23 years I clearly saw who she was. Not the woman I had fallen in love with, not the wife I thought I had, but the real person, the cruel, selfish person who had enjoyed making me small, because that made her feel big. I told you. I said in a calm voice. 6 years ago, I came home devastated. I told you Fuentes had taken my project, that they hadn't given me credit, that I felt betrayed. I paused, remembering that night with perfect clarity. Do you know what you told me? Rosalia shook her head, tears now running freely. You told me to stop being dramatic, that I should be lucky to have a job, that not everyone could be a star, and that if it had really been that good, they would have given me the credit. I saw her eyes widen with horror as she remembered. So no, Rosalia, it's not that I didn't tell you, it's that you didn't care enough to remember it. I stood up. Tomas also stood up, standing by my side like the brother he had always been. I'm leaving, I said simply, not home. There's no home for me there anymore. I'm going to a hotel tonight, and tomorrow I'll look for an apartment. Rosalia grabbed my arm. You can't leave. You can't leave me like this, Sebastian, please. It was just a joke. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. I looked at her one last time. Yes, you did mean it. You've meant it for years. The only difference is that tonight you did it in front of witnesses. I pulled away from her grip. I looked around the hall. Everyone was still watching in silence. Thanks for coming, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I hope you enjoyed the show. Happy New Year. And I walked towards the exit. Tomas walked with me. Vanessa too. When we reached the door, I heard Rosalia shout my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back because for the first time in over 2 decades I was walking forward, towards something new, towards something better, towards the life I should have always had. The cold night air hit my face when I left the hotel. It was almost midnight. I could hear the noise of the party behind me, muffled by the automatic glass doors closing. Music, nervous laughter, the murmur of 100 conversations about what had just happened, but all of that was behind me. I kept walking towards the parking lot with Tomas by my side and Vanessa a few steps behind. My legs moved automatically, one foot in front of the other, but my mind was blank. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel relief. It was as if all the emotions had canceled each other out, leaving me in a strange, almost unnatural state of calm. Tomas broke the silence. Brother, are you okay? I stopped next to my car. I looked at my hands. They still had traces of grease from the tire I had changed hours before. It seemed like an eternity had passed since that moment. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't know what I feel. I don't know what to think. I just know I can't go back there. Tomas nodded. You don't have to go back. You can stay at my place tonight. We have the guest room free. I was about to accept when Vanessa spoke from behind. Sebastian, if you'll allow me, we turned around. She looked serene under the parking lot lights, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of the most important corporate party of the year. I have a proposal. I know it's a lot to ask after everything that happened tonight, but I'd like for us to talk. Not tomorrow now? If you're up for it, of course. I looked at her curiously. Talk about what? About your future, she said simply. About what comes after this. Tomas looked at me. I shrugged. Okay. Where? Vanessa pointed to the hotel bar, one separate from the event hall. There, it's quiet. No people from the company, just the three of us. If Tomas wants to join you. My friend nodded. I'm not leaving you alone, brother. Not tonight. We went into the bar. It was a small place with dim lighting, soft jazz music in the background, and barely 3 or 4 people at the tables. We sat in a secluded corner. A waitress came over and Vanessa ordered a whiskey. Tomas ordered a beer. I ordered water. I needed my mind clear. When the waitress left, Vanessa leaned back in her seat and studied me with a serious expression. How much do you know about my background? She asked. Nothing, I admitted. I know you arrived 6 months ago as project director. That's all. She smiled slightly. Before coming here, I worked for 15 years at an architecture firm in Monterey. I started from the bottom, as a technical draftswoman. I moved up to junior designer, then to senior architect, finally to director. It was a long and difficult road. She took a sip of her whiskey when it arrived. I went through something similar to what happened to you. My boss, a man with a lot of prestige, took credit for one of my designs. It was an important corporate building. When I confronted him, he told me I was too young to receive that credit, that it would damage my career if it seemed like I had come up too fast, that he was going to take care of the project until I was ready. She paused. I was never ready, according to him. 3 years later, I submitted my resignation. But before that, I made sure that all the original files, all the emails, all the evidence reached the right people. He lost his license. I lost 3 years. I understood why she had done what she did tonight. It wasn't just for abstract justice. It was personal. I'm sorry, I said. She shook her head. Don't be sorry. It taught me something valuable. Talent without a voice is useless. And your voice was silenced a long time ago. By Fuentes, by Alonso, by your wife. She said the last word with particular disgust, but now everyone heard, and now you have options. She leaned forward. I've been working on something these past few months, an independent project. I want to open my own architecture firm specializing in developing innovative residential projects. Exactly the kind of things you were designing before they put you in that administrative office. My eyes widened. I've been looking for a partner, someone with experience, with vision, with the necessary talent. When I reviewed your work in those old files, I knew it was you, but I didn't know how to approach you. I didn't know if you still had that spark or if they had completely extinguished it. Tomas whistled softly. You're offering him a partnership. I'm offering him an opportunity, Vanessa corrected, to do what he should have always been doing, to get the credit he always deserved, to build something of his own, something no one can take away from him. She looked me straight in the eye. I have the initial capital. I have the contacts. I have the administrative experience. What I don't have is someone with your design ability, someone who can create spaces that really matter. I couldn't speak. It was too much. Everything was too much. 3 hours ago, my wife was auctioning me off like trash, and now this woman I barely knew was offering me the opportunity one had dreamed of for decades. You don't have to answer now, Vanessa said, seeing my expression. In fact, you shouldn't. It's an important decision. You need time. You need to process everything that happened tonight. But I want you to know that the offer is real, and it will be there when you're ready. Tomas put his hand on my shoulder. Brother, this is incredible. It's exactly what you need. But I slowly shook my head. You don't understand. 6 years ago, I would have killed for this opportunity. But now I don't know if I can still do it. It's been years since I designed anything real. What if I lost that skill? What if I'm no longer good? Vanessa smiled. I saw your designs, Sebastian. You don't lose that kind of talent. It gets a little rusty, maybe, but it gets cleaned. It recovers. And I have a feeling you have years of repressed creativity waiting to come out. I drank my water trying to sort my thoughts. Why me? You don't know me. You could partner with someone more established, with a better reputation. Because established people with a good reputation are boring, Vanessa said with a smile. They design the same thing over and over again. Safe, profitable, no risk. I don't want that. I want innovation. I want passion. And passion only comes from people who have something to prove. You have 23 years of humiliation to turn into greatness. That's the best motivation there is. I looked at her for a long moment. There was something about her that inspired trust. It wasn't just her professionalism or her obvious talent. It was her honesty, her direct lack of manipulation. After decades with Rosalia, with her constant mind games, her poisonous insinuations, her poisoned compliments, Vanessa's transparency was like fresh water. I need to think about it, I finally said. I need to get my life in order first. The divorce, finding a place to live, processing all this. She nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready. Tomas and I left the bar an hour later. Vanessa had gone home. We were left alone in the empty parking lot. It was past midnight. New Year had arrived without us noticing, without fireworks, without toasts, without celebration, but somehow it felt appropriate. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Tomas hugged me. A long, strong hug, the kind only true brothers give. I'm proud of you, he said in a hoarse voice. For getting out of there, for not going back to her, for finally choosing yourself. I didn't cry. I thought I would cry. I thought tonight would be full of tears and emotional breakdowns. But there were no tears, only exhaustion. A deep exhaustion that went beyond the physical. It was the exhaustion of carrying a weight for decades and finally letting it drop. Thanks for being here, I told him. Always, he replied. I'm always going to be here, brother. I drove behind Tomas to his house. His wife was waiting up, worried. She prepared the guest room for me without asking questions. She gave me a clean towel, some of Tomas's pajamas that were too big for me, and a motherly hug. Tomorrow, everything will look different, she said. It always does. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I was grateful for the words anyway. I lay down in that strange bed, in that house that wasn't mine, for the first time in 23 years without Rosalia beside me. And instead of feeling loneliness, I felt space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to be. I stared at the dark ceiling and thought about everything that had happened. The public humiliation, Vanessa's revelation, the unexpected offer, the end of my marriage. But most of all, I thought about that question Vanessa had planted in my mind. What comes next? For the first time in decades, the answer didn't terrify me, it excited me. The days following that night were strange and surreal, like living in a parallel reality where everything looked the same, but felt completely different. I stayed at Tomas's house for the first week. His wife Carolina treated me with a kindness that made me uncomfortable at first, as if I were a patient who needed special care. But gradually I understood it wasn't pity, it was respect. Respect for someone who had finally made a difficult decision. Rosalia called me 17 times the first day. She sent 32 messages. They all said variations of the same thing. I'm sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. Please, come home. Can we fix this? I didn't answer any of them. The second day, she knocked on the door of Tomas's house. He went out to talk to her. I watched them from the second-floor window. Rosalia was crying, gesturing, pointing towards the house as if I were an object that had been stolen from her, and she wanted it back. Tomas repeatedly shook his head. Finally, she left in a rage, slamming her car door so hard it echoed down the street. The third day, she changed her strategy. The messages went from apologies to accusations, that I was a coward, that I was overreacting, that I had always been too sensitive, that I had ruined her reputation in front of everyone, that I had publicly humiliated her. The irony of that last message almost made me laugh. Almost. I blocked her number that afternoon. The silence that followed was glorious. I hired a lawyer on the fourth day, a woman named Brenda who had been recommended to me by Tomas. She was 58 years old, with short gray hair and a look that made you feel she had seen all the worst versions of human beings, and nothing surprised her anymore. 23-year marriage, no children, no significant shared assets, she said, reviewing my documents. It should be relatively simple. Is there adultery, violence, anything that could complicate things? Emotional abuse, I said, constant for years. She felt as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Witnesses. Hundreds. The last time was in public. There are videos. Brenda raised an eyebrow. Videos. I told her about the party, about the auction, about everything. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. That makes things considerably easier. I'm going to need copies of those videos, and I need you to make a list of all the people who witnessed that incident and any other similar incidents. I left her office feeling strange. For years I had normalized Rosalia's behavior. I had justified it. I had minimized it. But hearing this lawyer, this serious and experienced professional, call it by its real name, emotional abuse, something changed in me. I wasn't sensitive. I wasn't exaggerating. It was real. It had been real all along. Monday came and I had to go back to work. I had considered taking days off, but Tomas convinced me it was better to keep the routine. Hiding is only going to make the rumors grow, he said. Keep your head up. You didn't do anything wrong. He was right, but that didn't make it any easier. I entered the company building at 8 in the morning. The security guard looked at me with a strange expression between pity and curiosity. The receptionist stopped talking on the phone when she saw me. I could feel the whispers following me as I walked to the elevators. When I reached my floor, the silence was even more obvious. Heads that turned and then quickly looked away. Conversations that stopped abruptly. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I kept walking to my office with my dignity intact. I closed the door behind me and took a deep breath. I had survived the entrance. That was something. At 9, my internal phone rang. It was Alonso's assistant. Mr. Alonso wants to see you in his office. Now, please. My stomach tightened. This was the conversation I had been dreading. I went up 2 floors to the CEO's office. His assistant let me in immediately. Alonso was sitting behind his huge mahogany desk with a serious expression. Sit down, Sebastian, he said without preamble. I sat down, waited. The drum, and read his fingers on the desk for a long moment before speaking. I've had a very interesting week, he began. Since New Year's night, I've received calls from the board of directors, from investors, from specialized media, all asking about the same topic, the Pacific Towers project, and who really designed it. He looked at me directly. Vanessa Herrera sent complete documentation to all of them. Documentation that, I must admit, is irrefutable. The original files have your name, the dates confirm it, the emails are clear. He paused. Why did you never say anything? Why did you never claim what was yours? The question took me by surprise. I had expected accusations, defenses, maybe even threats. Not honest questions, because I was afraid. I answered with the truth. I was 29 years old. My wife was pregnant. I needed the job and Fuentes was powerful. No one would have believed me over his word. Alonso nodded slowly. You're probably right, and that makes me an accomplice. I should have questioned, I should have investigated, but it was easier to celebrate success than to question its origin. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. The board wants to make a public statement, acknowledge the error, give you the official credit, offer you compensation. He turned to me, and I personally want to offer you something more, a position as Director of Architectural Design, your own department, complete creative control. The salary would be triple what you earn now. It was exactly what I would have wanted to hear 6 years ago, 6 months ago, even 6 weeks ago. But now, sitting in that office, looking at this man who had allowed my work to be stolen, who had allowed my career to be destroyed, I felt something different. I felt indifference. I appreciate the offer, I said calmly, but I'm going to decline. Alonso blinked in surprise. Decline, Sebastian. This is what you always wanted. Recognition. An important position, the opportunity to design again. It's what I wanted. I corrected. Past tense. I don't work like that anymore. I no longer want to belong to a place where my value was only recognized after a public scandal, where I needed someone else to fight for me, because no one here did for 6 years. I stood up. I'm going to submit my resignation effective in 2 weeks. That's the appropriate time to transfer my current projects. After that, I won't be back. Alonso looked genuinely shocked. You already have another job. I have something better, I said. I have an opportunity to build something of my own, something no one can take from me. I held out my hand. He took it after a moment. Good luck, Sebastian, he said, and for the first time he sounded sincere. Thanks, I replied. I'm going to need it. I left that office feeling lighter than I had in years. I had rejected the offer of my dreams, and it felt absolutely right. That afternoon, I called Vanessa. I accept your offer, I said without preamble. I want to be your partner. I want to build that firm with you. I could hear the smile in her voice. Excellent. Can you meet tomorrow? We have a lot to plan. The following weeks were a whirlwind. I worked my last days at the company with professionalism, transferring projects, documenting processes. Some colleagues avoided me. Others congratulated me quietly. Brenda, the woman from my department, hugged me on the last day. I never thought you'd do it, she said. I thought you'd stay here forever letting them walk all over you. I'm glad I was wrong. I found a small but bright apartment near the center. 1 bedroom, open kitchen, large windows. Nothing fancy, but mine, completely mine. Tomas and Carolina helped me move. I didn't have much. I had left almost everything in the house with Rosalia, furniture, decorations, memories. I didn't want anything from that life. I would start from scratch. The divorce process moved forward. Rosalia tried to fight it first, claiming half of everything, making things difficult. But when Brenda presented the videos from the party, when she presented testimonies from dozens of witnesses about years of emotional abuse, something in her broke. She accepted a simple and quick settlement. The house would be sold, and we would split the profits. The bank accounts would be separated. There would be no alimony for either of us. Clean, final, liberating. Vanessa and I started working on the firm. We rented a small space, just 2 offices and a common area. We hired an assistant, designed our logo. We registered the name, Herrera and Mendez Architects. Seeing my last name there in equality, in partnership, made me feel something I hadn't felt in decades. Pride. The first projects were small. Residential renovations, a country house, a boutique office, but I designed each one with everything I had, with all the creativity that had been repressed for years. And it was good, it was really good. The clients were delighted. The photos started circulating on social media. Slowly, our reputation grew. 3 months after that New Year's night, I received an envelope from the National Association of Architects. Inside was an official letter recognizing me as the original designer of the Pacific Towers project. A formal apology for the error and an invitation to receive a retroactive award at their annual ceremony. I stared at the letter for a long time. I felt something warm in my chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, it was closure. It was validation. It was the confirmation that I hadn't been crazy all these years, that my work had been worth it, that I had been worth it. A year after that night, I was standing at the entrance of my own architecture studio. Not the small space we had rented with Vanessa at the beginning, but a real place with large windows that let in natural light, drawing tables, state-of-the-art computers, and a meeting room overlooking the city. Herrera and Mendez, architects, had grown faster than either of us had imagined. We had 6 employees now, 3 major projects under development, and a waiting list of clients who wanted to work with us. Vanessa came into my office that morning with 2 cups of coffee and a huge smile. Guess what? She said, leaving a cup on my desk. What? They just contacted us for the city's new cultural complex project, direct competition against 5 large firms, including your old company. I laughed. That's ironic. That's poetic justice, she corrected. And we're going to win. She was right. 3 weeks later, we presented our proposal. A design that combined functionality with beauty, sustainability with innovation, exactly the kind of work I had always wanted to do. And we won. The day they announced our victory, Tomas came to the studio with a bottle of champagne for the man everyone said was worth $50. He toasted with a huge smile for proving you were always priceless. Everyone laughed, even me, because it didn't hurt anymore. That night, that public humiliation had turned into something different in my memory. It wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning, the brutal push I needed to finally wake up. My divorce was finalized in March. I received the signed papers at my new apartment. I looked at the document that officially ended 23 years of marriage, and I didn't feel sadness. I felt a relief so deep it almost made me dizzy. Rosalia had tried to contact me several times during the year. At first with anger, then with pleas, finally with forced indifference. I never replied. There was nothing to say. She was part of a past I had completely left behind. I heard rumors about her occasionally, that she had moved to another city, that she had lost friendships after the video of the party circulated. that her family was ashamed. Part of me, the part that had loved that woman decades ago, felt something like pity, but it was a distant, abstract pity, like what you feel for a stranger in the news. It was no longer my problem, no longer my responsibility, no longer my life. I started doing things I had never allowed myself to do. I joined a gym and started taking care of my health, not because someone told me I should, but because I wanted to feel good. I lost weight gradually, not to look a certain way, but because I felt stronger, more capable. I bought clothes I liked without worrying if someone else would approve. I decorated my apartment with things I chose, not things someone else decided should be there. Small freedoms that, added up, felt monumental. I also started having a social life again. Dinners with Tomas and Carolina, outings with colleagues from the studio, even a few occasional dates, though nothing serious. I wasn't looking for another relationship. I was learning to be alone, without feeling lonely, to enjoy my own company, to be enough for myself. It was something I had never experienced. I had gone from living with my parents to living with Rosalia. I had never been just me, and it turned out I quite liked who I was when no one else was defining me. The National Association of Architects Awards ceremony was in November. I wore a new suit, a dark gray one that fit me perfectly. Tomas came with me, Vanessa too. When they called my name to receive the recognition for Pacific Towers, I went up on stage calmly. There were no nerves, no fear, just peace. The president of the association handed me a commemorative plaque and asked me to say a few words. I looked at the audience, hundreds of architects, designers, industry professionals, and spoke from the heart. I designed this project when I was 29. I thought it was going to be the start of a brilliant career. Instead, it was the start of 6 years of silence, 6 years of seeing my work credited to someone else, 6 years of wondering if it had really been worth it. I paused, but those 6 years taught me something important. They taught me that talent without dignity is worthless, that success without self-respect is empty, and that it's never, ever too late to reclaim who you really are. The applause was deafening, but what meant the most was seeing Tomas in the front row with tears in his eyes, seeing Vanessa smiling with pride, seeing people I didn't know giving a standing ovation. This was my moment. No one had given it to me. No one had taken it from me. It was mine. After the ceremony, several young architects came up to me. They wanted to know my story, they wanted advice. And I realized something. My experience, as painful as it had been, could help others. I could be the voice I didn't have. I could tell them not to stay silent, not to accept being invisible, that their work mattered and that they mattered. I started giving talks at universities, mentoring students, using my story as an example that it's never too late to change your life. In December, exactly 1 year after that disastrous party, Vanessa organized a celebration at the studio. The whole team was there. Tomas and Carolina, some clients who had become friends. There was food, music, decorations. It was simple, but warm, real. At one point in the evening, Vanessa asked for attention. "I want to make a toast," she said, raising her glass. "A year ago, I saw a man be publicly humiliated by someone who supposedly loved him. I saw that man stay quiet, dignified, while his world exploded around him. And I thought, that man deserves better." She looked at me directly. I didn't know at that moment that that man would become my best partner, my friend, someone whose talent and dedication inspire our entire team every day. She raised her glass higher for Sebastian, for proving that a person's worth isn't defined by those who belittle them, but by those who recognize them, and above all by who recognizes themselves. Everyone drank, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. I felt I belonged, that I mattered, that I was seen. That night, back in my apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at the man reflected there. 52 years old, less hair than before, but I didn't care anymore. A few more gray hairs, some deeper wrinkles around the eyes, but also something different. A light that hadn't been there for years, a straighter posture, a calmer expression. This was me. Finally, completely, unquestionably, me. I thought about Rosalia on that night a year ago, how she had tried to auction me off for $50, convinced that was my value. And I laughed. I laughed because for 23 years I had believed that too. I had believed I was worth what others decided I was worth. I had believed my price was negotiable. I had believed I deserved to be treated as less than nothing, but I was wrong. Everyone was wrong because for these 23 years I believed I was worth $50. Today I know I was always priceless because I wasn't for sale. I never was. I just needed to remember it. And when I finally did it, when I finally understood that my value didn't depend on the validation of others, everything changed. My work flourished, my relationships improved, my life became something I really wanted to live. I turned off the bathroom light and walked to my room. Tomorrow would be another day of work at the studio, another day of creating, of designing, of building something that mattered, another day of being free. I got into my bed, in my apartment, in my life that I had built from scratch, and for the first time in more years than I could count, I fell asleep completely at peace. Not with the weight of impossible expectations, not with the pain of constant humiliations, just with the quiet certainty that finally, after so much lost time, I had found my way back to myself. And that path was worth infinitely more than any price anyone ever tried to put on me.